Okay, and here's the second half of our notes on adding and subtracting rational expressions. Remember, the key is we have to have the common denominator. If not, we have to find one. Okay, we've got an x minus 3 in the denominator and x plus 1. Neither of these have anything in common, so we need to multiply them together to get a common denominator. That means that the denominator is going to be x plus 1 times x minus 3. Now I can't just multiply this fraction by x plus 1. I have to multiply by x plus 1 over x plus 1. Because in essence, that's the same as multiplying by the number 1. This fraction gets multiplied by x minus 3 over x minus 3. So now when we write this out, on the bottom we're going to have x minus 1 multiplied by x plus 3. Our numerator is going to be x plus 1 times x plus 2 minus these two times each other. So x plus 1 multiplied by x plus 2, so again that's just from here to here, minus x plus 2 multiplied by x minus 3. Now here's where we've got to go through and multiply these guys in the numerator and then subtract them. So when I want to multiply x plus 1 times x plus 2, I can do box or FOIL. I'm going to use FOIL this time. So x times x, x times 2, 1 times x, and 1 times 2. So I get x squared plus 2x plus x plus 2 minus. Now notice I'm putting everything inside the parentheses here because the result of this I have to subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply it using FOIL, and then we'll go through and subtract it. And all of this is going to be over x minus 1, x plus 3. So again, we're going to do FOIL x times x times negative 3, 2 times x, and 2 times a minus 3. So we get x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 6. Okay, let's try and put all these pieces together. X squared minus x squared. Well, that leaves nothing. That was easy. And here we've got 2x plus 3x, 2x plus x gives us 3x, minus a negative 3x. So 3x minus a negative, that's the same as adding. So that becomes 3x plus 3x is 6x minus 2x. That's 4x. So we've got 4x now. We combine this, and here we have a positive 2 minus a negative 6. So minus a negative is the same as adding it. So plus 8 over x, minus 1 times x plus 3. And as a last step, it's always a good idea to factor the top to see if you are able to cancel anything. So it looks like I can factor out a 4. If I factor 4 out, I have x plus 2 over x minus 1 multiplied by x plus 3. And unfortunately, nothing cancels. But that is our simplest answer right there. Okay, so again, we found our common denominator by multiplying the denominators together and then simplifying. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. Ooh, thankfully it's already factored for us. So my first fraction, I have an x minus 1 in the denominator and an x plus 3. Second fraction, I have an x plus 1 and an x minus 1 in the denominator. Now every unique term or every unique factor must be in my common denominator. So our lowest common denominator is going to be x minus 1 multiplied by x plus 3. Let's see, x plus 1 and x minus 1. But notice we already have an x minus 1 in our least common denominator. So this is my lowest common denominator. So let's write that as our lowest common denominator, x minus 1 times x plus 3 times x plus 1. Now if I look at this first fraction, what do I need to multiply it by to get to my lowest common denominator? And it looks like the only term that's missing is my x plus 1. So that means I'm going to multiply this by x plus 1 over x plus 1. My second fraction, I've got an x plus 1 and x minus 1. I'm missing the x plus 3 in the denominator. So I will multiply by x plus 3 over x plus 3. When I go through to multiply these now, I've got x plus 1 times 1. Well, anything times 1 is just itself, plus 5 times x plus 3. So 5 times x is 5x, and 5 times 3 is 15. And now we want to try and simplify this if possible. And typically that means we're going to add our like terms. So I've got x plus 5x gives me 6x. 1 plus 15 gives me 16. Okay, and make sure we write all the terms from the denominator. Remember, we don't need to multiply these together because we're going to try and see if we can cancel anything at the end. Okay, so we've got 6x plus 16 over x minus 1 times x plus 3 times x plus 1. Now 6x and 16 both look like a 2 would go into them. So I'm going to factor out a 2. And 6x divided by 2 gives me a 3x. 16 divided by 2 gives me 8. I can already tell we're not going to be able to factor or cancel anything here. Okay, nothing cancels, but we have got it to its simplest form, so we know that nothing cancels, and that's our result. Okay, a couple more to go. Look at this one. Okay, so again we have two fractions that we're subtracting them. That's not a big deal. But I don't know if they have anything in common because they're not factored for me. So that means I'm going to have to practice factoring. Okay, so let's take a look here. I'm going to do this on some scratch paper. I need to factor this denominator. And notice my a value is not 1. So I need to multiply 3 times negative 2, and I get a negative 6. So I need factors that multiply to negative 6, but add to the negative 1. Okay, so negative 3 and positive 2 give me that right combination. So I would have x minus 3 times x plus 2. But again, I'm not done. I have to divide by 3. So I will divide each one by 3 and reduce. 3 divided by 3 is just 1, so x minus 1 is one of my factors. I cannot reduce the 2/3 at all, so that one, I've got to kick that denominator. I get 3x plus 2. So my factors for the first denominator are x minus 1 times 3x plus 2. Okay, now let's do the same thing with the second fraction. And this one I'm going to do the same setup, but instead of using the parentheses, I'm going to put it in the box because some of you like that better. So here I've got to look for things that multiply. 3 times 8 is 24, and they have to add to give me 14. Okay, so what multiplies to 24 but adds to 14? Okay, if I'm not thinking about it right away, start with just number 1. 1 times 24, they multiply to the correct number, but they don't add to 14. 2 times 12, they multiply to 24, and they add to 14. So those are my answers. And now I put them into a box. And again, you could put these in the parentheses, it does not matter. The first term in the box is the first one from your equation, so 3y squared. The bottom right is the last term, the constant. And these two boxes, top right and lower left, are these two factors that we found. We just add the variables, so 2y and 12y. And now we find the greatest common factor in each row and each column. In the top row, it looks like 3y goes into 3y squared and into 12y. In the bottom row, 2 goes into both of those. First column, it looks like the only thing in common is the variable y. And second column, it looks like 4 goes into both of those. So my factors for the second denominator are 3y plus 2 and y plus 4. Oh gosh, do you see what I just did? On the first one, I switched over here to using x's instead of y's and put them in here. Well, I'll never find anything in common there. So let's change these back to y's. We have the same variable in the whole problem. Okay, so now we've got our denominator needs to have a y minus 1, a 3y plus 2. Ah, look, that repeats. And a y plus 4. So my lowest common denominator is y minus 1 multiplied by 3y plus 2 multiplied by anything unique in the second one that we don't already have. So 3y plus 2, I've already got it listed, but y plus 4 needs to be in here. So my lowest common denominator is made up by these three factors. So let's write that out. Y minus 1, 3y plus 2, and y plus 4. Now my first fraction, I've got the y minus 1 and the 3y plus 2, so the only term missing in my denominator is the y plus 4. So I'm going to have to multiply by y plus 4 over y plus 4. My second fraction, I've got the 3y plus 2 and the y plus 4. I'm missing the y minus 1. So we'll multiply by y minus 1 over y minus 1. Okay, let's take a look at this. Y minus 4 times y minus 4. So again, we're going to have to do that FOIL or box. So I'm going to get y squared plus 4y plus 4y plus 16. And we're subtracting these fractions now. So I'm going to put a minus and put in parentheses what I get over here. 1 multiplied by y minus 1 is just y minus 1. Okay, so let's try and combine our terms. Look at our y squareds. We only have one y squared. There's nothing to subtract, so it's just a y squared on top. Now, we've got 4y plus 4y, so that's 8y, minus y, so that's 7y. 16 minus a negative 1. Again, minus a negative makes that a positive, so 16 plus 1 gives me 17. And my denominator is y minus 1, 3y plus 2, and y plus 4. We take a quick look. We've got a quadratic on the top, so we want to see, can we factor this at all? So is there anything that multiplies to 17 that adds to 7? And the only factors of 17 are 1 and 17, and they certainly don't add to 7. So we are done at this point. We have checked to see if we can cancel anything, and we cannot. Excellent. Excellent work. Okay, 2 more. M's this time. Okay. Let me make sure I remember to call them M's. So we need factors that multiply to 4, but add to 4. Okay, that's 2 and 2. So M plus 2. M plus 2. Our A value is 1, so we need things that multiply to negative 6 but add to negative 1. So M minus 3 and M plus 2. And with practice, you are going to get just as fast at recognizing these factors. Okay, so our least common denominator needs to have an M plus 2 and another M plus 2 because there's 2 in this fraction. So we need both of those in our lowest common denominator. We also need an M minus 3. And look, another M plus 2. We will have already put that in from this fraction. So our lowest common denominator is M plus 2, M plus 2. So that covers both of those terms. Now we need an M minus 3. And this M plus 2 we've already thrown into our lowest common denominator. Okay, so my first fraction is missing the M minus 3 in the denominator, so we multiply by M minus 3 over M minus 3. Second fraction is missing a second M plus 2 term, so we multiply it by M plus 2 over M plus 2. Okay, now we've got some multiplication to do with FOIL or box. And I'm just doing FOIL for space reasons, really. So M times M is M squared. M times negative 2 is negative 2M. negative 3 times m is a minus 3m, and minus 3 times minus 2 is a positive 6, plus m times m, m squared, m times 2 is 2m, minus 1 times m is minus m, and minus 1 times a positive 2 is a minus 2. Okay, now let's try and fit these all together. Our denominator is going to stay the same, m plus 2 times m plus 2 times m minus 3. And we've got m squared and m squared, so when we add terms, our exponents do not change, so we've got 2m squared. And again, I'm just crossing these out because we've got a lot of things to add together. Minus, or a negative 2m minus 3m, that gives me negative 5m, plus 2m, that gives me a negative 3m, and another negative m, negative 4m. So total of our negatives was we've got a negative 2, negative 3, and negative 1. That was a negative 6m plus 2 gives us a negative 4m. And 6 minus 2 is 4. Okay, let's take a look and see if we can do anything here. I'm running out of room, as you may be also, so I'm continuing on another piece of paper underneath here. First thing I notice in my numerator, because I want to factor this to see if I can cancel anything, looks like there's a 2 in every term, so let's factor that 2 out. So we've got 2 times m squared minus 2m plus 2 over m plus 2, m plus 2, m minus 3. There's nothing we can do to factor this any further because I'm looking for factors of 2 that add to negative 2. And if I had negative 1 and negative 2, those multiply together correctly, but they would add to negative 3. So I'm done at this point. A lot of work, but we got through it, just one step at a time, and watch our signs as we do it. Okay, last problem. This one has 3 terms that we're adding together. Okay, so we still approach it the exact same way. First thing I've got to do is make sure I've got all my denominators factored. Nothing I can do here or here. But this term, 2 perfect squares that are subtracted, so it's the difference of 2 squares. So I can break this into x plus 3 multiplied by x minus 3. There we go. Okay, so now we need to figure out what our lowest common denominator is. And I'm just going to write it down here for the sake of room. I need to have an x minus 3 in it. I need to have an x. Now this x is different than the x in here. So I need to include an x. I need an x plus 3 and an x minus 3. Now I already have the x minus 3, so I don't need to put that in again. So again, we need all the unique factors from each denominator. So this first term, it's already got x minus 3 in the denominator, but it still needs an x and an x plus 3. So it's going to be multiplied by x times x plus 3 over x times x plus 3. Our middle term has the x, but it's missing x minus 3 and x plus 3. So x minus 3 times x plus 3 over, try and squeeze this in. And our last term, we have x plus 3, x minus 3. The only thing we're missing is x, so we have to multiply by x over x. Okay, let's try multiplying these together. Now it does not matter the order we multiply, so let's multiply the 7 times the x first. So we've got 7x, and then we'll need to multiply that by the x plus 3. The next one, minus 5. X minus 3 times x plus 3, we already know that that is x squared minus 9, minus 2x, again we've got to put the parentheses, 2x plus 6 multiplied by x. Okay, we just want to make sure we don't lose anything as we do all these multiplications. So let's go ahead and do this. Denominator, I'm actually going to put the x in the front. Typically we have our lone variables by themselves, but it really doesn't matter what order you write them when everything is multiplied together. 7x times x gives me 7x squared. 7x times 3 is 21x. Minus 5 times x squared is a minus 5x squared. Minus 5 times minus 9 gives me a positive 45. And here we've got 2x times x. That's 2x squared, but we've got to subtract it, so minus 2x squared. Now 6 times x is 6x, but we have to subtract that, so minus 6x. Okay, now we get to start seeing what we can do to simplify this guy. Let's start with our x squared. So we've got 7x squared minus 5x squared minus 2x squared. So 7 minus 5 is 2, minus 2, oh, they just cancel out. That's rather nice. Now let's look at our x. 21x minus 6x is 15x. Okay, we've got those. Plus 45 over x times x plus 3 times x minus 3. Okay, last step. Look at how much simpler this is looking already. Looks like we can factor on the top. So it looks like both of those terms have a 15 in them. So if I factor the 15 out, I'm left with x plus 3 over x times x plus 3 multiplied by x minus 3. And look at that, I've got the identical factors here. So I'm going to cancel those. So I'm left with 15 over x times x minus 3. And that would be your answer on here. Excellent. So again, remember our steps. Factor your denominators. Look for a common denominator. If you do not have a common denominator, you want to look for your lowest common denominator. And to find the lowest common denominator, you need every unique term from each fraction. Multiply each fraction by the missing term over itself, and then add or subtract as needed. At the end, you always want to look at your numerator. Again, the numerator's on top, and see if you can factor it so you can cancel out some pieces. Okay, good luck. Come see me if you need help.